Good morning, comrades. It is Monday, and it is a holiday Monday, so we're going to have a Monday fun day. And you know why we're going to do that? Because Kamala Harris said so. I don't know why, but conservatives seem to be mad about this 3-day weekend. But it was granted on high from the one and only Kamala Harris, so what are you complaining about? The Queen has spoken. If people don't know what I'm talking about, there was a really weird dust-up on Twitter. And, I'm not normally one to defend Kamala Harris in most situations. Really, one, her politics aren't mine. Two, she's a big girl, she can handle herself, shit like that. But, people got upset about her. Here's Nikki Haley calling Kamala Harris unprofessional and unfit for telling people to enjoy the long weekend. I mean, look. Look. First off, that picture of Nikki Haley is hilarious because she's got this sad scowl. But why is she mad at Kamala Harris? Let's look. Former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley criticized Vice President Kamala Harris on Sunday over well wishes sent out for the holiday weekend. Harris shared a tweet on Saturday that featured a photo of herself and the message, "Enjoy the long weekend." Haley, who served as President Trump's ambassador to the United Nations, seemingly took issue with the tweet. She retweeted it, quote tweeted it, and wrote, "Unprofessional and unfit." Now, I'm not here to say Kamala Harris is professional and fit or whatever. That's not the point of this. It's not clear what Haley didn't like about the tweet, but some Twitter users expressed disapproval that Harris tweeted about the long weekend instead of what Memorial Day is about. And we're going to have to look at some of these replies. So strap in. Memorial Day takes place annually on the last Monday of May to honor and mourn United States military personnel who died in the line of duty. Harris tweeted Sunday morning, hours before Haley's criticism about the meaning of the national holiday, whatever. Like, it's just people like getting fucking weird about like, oh, it's the fallen troops, brother. It's the fallen troops. They're gone but not forgotten. I kneel for the. I stand for the flag and I kneel for the cross, brother. That kind of crap. But they love to have, meltdowns over like the tiniest little shit. I guess that's like one of their key American values is like snowflakery or something. But let's look at the replies here. Actually, just to Kamala's tweet. Care to mention why we're having a long weekend, Kamala? That's Lauren Boebert. We enjoyed having a president and VP who respected America's heroes. Nice. What are you doing, Chew on Head? That's weird. This weekend is our time as a nation to honor our fallen. It is our dedicated time to reflect on war fighters, those who pay the ultimate price for our freedom. Code of Vets? What the fuck? God, these people are insane. That's one of the few times that you'll ever see a military casket being walked into a plane, because they cover that shit up. Dead troops and stuff, during the Iraq War. Remember that? Long weekend, do better. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. Selena Meyer? What is Selena Meyer? There's so many replies. Holy shit. Oh, God, that's pretty awesome. Wow. Whoa. In case you thought it was about a 3-day weekend, yeah, dead troops, whatever. Man, these people are such fucking babies. I actually do have something very funny to show you. Like, I was at Lowe's the other day, and like, how people get stupid, like, businesses started like try and do weird virtue signaling for these kind of like military holidays and shit like that. Well, the Lowe's had this the other day. There's me grilling. That's really what the weekend's about, by the way. The weekend is about grilling. Like, if you think it's not about grilling, then you have it all wrong and you hate America, actually. Also, yeah, yesterday was National MS Day. World MS Day, I beg your pardon. But yeah, Lowe's they usually have a parking spot that's reserved for veterans. But on this day, you couldn't even park there. This is yesterday. They put like a bunch of plants, an American flag, and like some seating. And this is in the middle of the parking lot. Like, I thought it was so very strange that, like, what's he gonna do? You just gonna like go chill there for a little bit and like hang out? I was gonna go and buy some one piece of wood from Lowe's and hold it in a bag for a picture, like weirdo Ben Shapiro. But instead, I'm just gonna like sit in this veterans lounge that's in one parking spot. Because this place is cool. This place rules. That's exactly where I want to spend any amount of time in my life. Like, it's not even worth stealing valor, honestly. Although Kyle did say he would totally smoke there. Man, it's not like the furniture's bad. They also have a white picket fence there for some reason. I find that to be like a very funny touch. So there you go. That was the example of the Cult of the Troops that I've found to be the funniest this weekend. I'm feeling pretty chill today. How about y'all? Just vibing. Oops, wrong one. Got that vibing music going. Hello. This is Good Morning, Comrade. So, let's see. What can we watch? I figure we could do some reacts today. You're not an introvert, you're just mentally deranged. Sure, let's watch this Dreg video. It's usually pretty funny, right? All right, first we gotta turn that music down. All right, let's see what we got here.
Look, nobody else is gonna tell you this.
Hold on.
Look, nobody else is gonna tell you this, so it's gotta be me. You're not an introvert. You're just mentally disturbed. I know. It was a nice little label. You enjoyed it. I know you did, but you're not an introvert. It's not normal that you haven't left the house in 1 year. That's not just what introverts do. That's a you problem. Oh, wow. You haven't had any human contact in months. Haha, how quirky. Wow, you're such a great introvert. Haha, just kidding. That's a personality disorder. You have a personality disorder. Oh, you avoid eye contact when people are talking to you. You can't go to parties because you're too socially anxious. Doesn't sound like something you should be incorporating into your identity with a label like introvert. Sounds like problems you need to solve. Sounds like fundamental personality issues that aren't going to get better if you hide them under the label of introvert. Also, real quick, introversion doesn't mean misanthropy. Who the fuck told you that being an introvert means that you hate humanity? You shouldn't hate humanity. You shouldn't foster your identity around hating humanity. It's not healthy. You're using the term introvert as a one-word explanation for all your fucked up psychopathologies. And don't even get me started on the bad extroverts. Half of you introvert motherfuckers are just bad extroverts. Everybody thinks they're an introvert, but statistically, most people are extroverts. What does that tell you? You're not an introvert. You just suck as a person. Wow. You suck. Go to our introvert. There's 200,000 members. Go to our extrovert. It doesn't fucking exist. Look, I know that in this, let's say, climate, it's a lot easier to pretend like you don't actually need social interaction, that we can explain it away with a comfortable label and pretend like we actually prefer to be alone, all the while fundamentally misunderstanding what the term introvert actually means, substituting meeting new people with finding a new podcast to listen to, so that when you listen to it, it almost feels like a new person is speaking to you. Wow, it's so new. But it's not a substitute. It's that thing, it's that desperate, essential thing that you know you lack, but you've been ignoring this whole time because it's easier to ignore than to... Wait a second. Fuck, I knew this would happen. This always happens. It turns out I'm talking to the mirror the whole time. I'm tired of this format. I meant what I said.
That's awesome. Yeah, Dreg don't miss. Check out Dreg. Here's a link to that video. And just check out his channel. He's very good. I've never seen someone cut such a good promo on themselves. I'm impressed. All right. Let's look at this Uber video.
Among the pantheon of corporations that have emerged out of...
That's pretty loud. My bad. That's pretty loud.
Silicon Valley, Uber occupies a special place. The company is worth $100 billion. Hundreds of billions of dollars worth of trips and delivery orders have been booked using its app. It gets tens of billions of dollars in revenue each year. Uber is everywhere, and the narrative of Uber is also everywhere. It says that Uber is innovative, that it can disrupt the taxi industry and make money doing it, and that it can offer flexibility and opportunity to its army of drivers. Everybody wins.
All that stuff sounds so good. What's the catch?
None of that is true. Let's start with one basic fact. For a company so prominent, there's something very strange. Uber has never, not once, turned a single profit.
That's
You might
weird.
be confused. How can it be that such a large company with such a popular service has simply never made money? When you find out the answer, you discover something important. You discover that Uber is fundamentally a scam, a company that exists to scam its investors, its users, and most importantly, scam its workers. Despite everything you might hear, Uber is not a technology company. While the company may brag about its sophisticated algorithm, in reality, Uber is just another taxi company.
That's
There's
true.
nothing fundamentally more efficient about Uber than there was with your local taxi service. The business is the same. There's no real way to innovate someone driving someone or something from point A to point B. Using an app to match riders with drivers is so simple that local taxi companies do the same thing. In fact, Uber is less efficient than taxi companies. Most normal taxi companies don't spend huge amounts on marketing or lobbying or corporate headquarters. They don't pay their CEO $45 million a year.
God
Uber has
damn.
higher costs than traditional taxi operators in every category except fuel. So why is Uber everywhere while taxi companies go out of business? It all goes back to Uber's master plan. First, with massive amounts of money from venture capitalists, Uber subsidized significantly cheaper rides than what taxi companies could offer to attract customers away from them. Then, after years of undercutting competitors and driving them to bankruptcy, resulting in a wave of suicides by cab drivers,
What?
Uber established near monopolies in local markets. Now, Uber is often the default way to get around if you don't have a car. And once Uber has eradicated its competition, it can make itself profitable at expense of users
Right.
and drivers.
That's exactly what Amazon did. Amazon just essentially just like burned out every other possible market that could compete, and then basically had total control, and then took it over, and then started making its money.
Raising its fares to what taxis offered or higher while pushing down drivers' wages. The plan is not
good,
efficiency.
folks.
It's monopoly.
Not good.
And that's not just me theorizing. A 73-page article in the Transportation Law Journal took a deep look at Uber's business and concluded one thing. Uber has no ability, now or in the foreseeable future, to earn sustainable profits in a competitive marketplace. Uber's investors cannot earn returns on the money they invest without achieving levels of market dominance that would allow them to exploit anti-competitive market power. So that is Uber's grand plan. It is not increasing the productivity or efficiency of the industry that it's in. It's subsidizing its rides with venture capital cash until it can build a monopoly and do whatever it wants. So users who buy Uber's narrative may be getting scammed, but no one is getting it worse than Uber's workers. So,
as usual, the workers take it on the fucking chin.
Uber relies on classifying drivers as independent contractors. In the United States, that means an individual provides services to a company, but is independent of the company and its control. Uber says that because drivers can choose what work to accept and for how long, they're fully independent. Now, most of Uber's workers drive part-time, but they actually do relatively little driving, and 90% of them quit each year. The majority of Uber's
That's
labor
a
is done by a
fucking hell of a
smaller
turnover
group
rate.
of workers who
Turnover
drive full-time for the company. So who are these drivers? In cities like New York, the vast majority are immigrants from places like India, Bangladesh, and Haiti. They desperately need cash to support their families and send
Yeah, the whole narrative around Uber is like, oh yeah, you can make a little extra money by driving for Uber, is like they rely on that narrative so that people can be like, well, I can benefit from this. And then when you do it and you find it as really hard or whatever, because it is, then you burn out and you can just say, oh, I wasn't cut out for it or whatever. You don't realize that like that's the same for everybody.
remittances back home. These are people at the very margins of our society. And how does Uber
That
treat
Uber
them?
globe, look like kind of freaks me out a little bit. That's freaking me out.
Uber treats them like a pool of cheap labor, easy to exploit and then discard. Uber's always been clear about one thing. It does not care about its drivers. At Uber's green light centers, where drivers register with the company, they were not even allowed to enter bathrooms reserved for employees. In fact,
The
when
fuck?
Uber was talking about how it would become profitable, It stated clearly that it wanted to get rid of its drivers and transition entirely to self-driving cars. But Uber's technology was so bad that after burning billions of dollars, it had to give up. So for now, Uber is stuck with its drivers. And in order to appear like it's coming closer to profitability, it's been cutting their wages since 2015. Whenever Uber increases its cut from each trip or reduces the minimum rate for drivers, its margins improve by that much immediately. As a result, Uber drivers regularly earn less than the minimum wage. After taking hidden costs like fuel into account, the average Uber driver
Also,
earns
they
a
drive
little
their
over
own
$9
cars.
an hour, about 50% less than what taxi drivers made before Uber. In fact, half of Uber drivers live at or
God,
below
capitalism
the
is
poverty
so
level.
good, man.
20% of them have to use food stamps to
I
survive.
love innovation. I truly do. This is fantastic. This is what capitalism is bringing us. This is what innovation is getting for us. Ways to drive wages of workers down. Ways to deregulate the entire, essentially, taxi industry. Man, this rules. I love capitalism.
Unable to afford a home, some drivers even sleep in their cars. Drivers with nothing to their name get trapped in predatory car rental schemes promoted by Uber. They garnish your wages until you've paid it off with interest. One study from Georgetown found that a third of drivers reported falling into a debt trap. Some ended up earning less than $5 an hour. And because its drivers are technically independent contractors, Uber can avoid pesky requirements like minimum wages, health insurance, or paid sick leave. Drivers can't
Also paying into Social Security, paying into Medicare. Like, it's putting it all on the driver.
unionize to bargain for better conditions. Uber has all the power, and it makes sure it can stay that way.
This is a good video.
When California tried to classify drivers as employees, Uber spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a campaign to overturn it with a ballot proposition written by Uber's lawyers.
22.
And even though Uber talks about flexibility, that's not what drivers actually experience. Drivers may not have physical bosses to order them around, but they're ruled by something even worse, an algorithmic overseer that's more intrusive than any flesh and blood boss could ever be. Uber's only actual innovations are in surveilling and disciplining its workforce. They're always watching, monitoring driving behavior, calculating fraud profiles, using invisible secret functions to discipline drivers as well as customers. Fall below an arbitrary threshold for ratings? Fired. Reject too many trips because you don't want to lose any money? Fired. Did a customer make a false report? Fired. So that's the freedom that Uber offers. It frees drivers to make below minimum wage, to sleep in their cars, to beg for 5-star ratings and work themselves to the bone. But at the end of the day, Uber, like other gig companies, is an innovator, not in technology, but in exploitation. Yep. It's leading the war against labor in ways other companies never thought possible. It oversees a pool of atomized, ultra-exploited laborers, writes its own regulations, and has done it all without earning a single cent of profit. Imagine what sort of world they'll need to start making one. I'm Edward Ongweso Jr., staff writer at Vice for the Gravel Institute.
That was pretty good. I like that video. Gravel Institute's doing good work. Gotta say. All right. Let's do this one. This is Renegade Cut. If anybody has knows Renegade Cut or whatever, please ask them to unblock me on Twitter. I like their videos, and I don't know why I'm blocked. There's a fight in Louisiana legislature right now over 2 bills aimed at restricting companies from bogus independent contractor designations of employees. Good luck with that. Yeah. That's typical. And actually, the PRO Act would be something that would be good for this particular issue, because it actually defines what a worker is and what an independent contractor is. So I was on a phone bank briefly. I had to dip out a little bit early, but DSA is still doing phone banks to get the PRO Act passed. It's been added to Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. Got to pass that. Good morning, Trey. Happy long weekend.
Politicians decide their own story in advance and sell that story through optics, through misinformation, through propaganda, through a willing media eager for heroes and uplifting stories. Throughout his career in politics, Rudy Giuliani cultivated an image for himself: the top cop, the counter-terror expert, the hero, the man who turned New York City around, the man who foresaw 9/11, and the man who saved the city on that tragic day. This image was held together through iconic visuals and
He saved the city so good that he allowed 9/11 to happen. What? I don't really understand that.
mythology that is
Like,
more
I don't
appealing.
understand the point that like he did anything worth anything. Like, I don't know. He just he was there to take the pictures when 9/11 happened. That's the Rudy Giuliani like thing.
Than the truth. Since 2020, that image has changed, owing much to his relationship
Your cruel employer, you, is making you work today, but Kamala Harris said we had to have a 3-day weekend.
with Donald Trump, various scandals
I
related
don't know if you saw at the top of the show. It was there was like a weird freak out by and like I don't even like Kamala Harris that much, but like there was this weird freak out about her like saying enjoy the long weekend, and like a lot of conservatives were like, well, what's the weekend for actually? It's ridiculous. But your boss, yeah, you got to do something about that boss there, Trey.
to the administration, as well as a series of embarrassing public disasters. The narrative in the media was one of surprise. What happened to America's mayor?
America's mayor.
The fall from grace is always a fascinating story, and media appreciates it when a story is written for them. However, the story of Rudy Giuliani is not that of a hero who became a villain. Anyone who followed his tenure as mayor found his top cop image transparent and his so-called turnaround of New York dubious. Anyone who read the report from the 9/11 Commission or further studies found his hero of 9/11 act a performance. Giuliani has not fallen from a grace that he never had. He simply lost control of his image, and now that he has, his actions over his career are much clearer, his motivations more obvious, and his misdeeds harder to ignore. Rudy Giuliani grew up in an Italian-American neighborhood in New York City. His father was a low-level mob enforcer.
I
a
sure
part of
hope
his
this
life
video does not stoop to the low level of anti-Italian discrimination. That would be a shame.
that he preferred not to acknowledge in public. It was but grew up in an Italian-American neighborhood in New York City. His father was a low-level mob enforcer, a part of his life that he preferred not to acknowledge in public. It was perhaps this background that made Giuliani desire the opposite image, a tough-on-crime prosecutor. Giuliani worked in the Ronald Reagan administration as Associate Attorney General and eventually in the Southern District of New York, the most sought-after United States Attorney's office. After a failed mayoral campaign in 1989, Giuliani ran again in 1993, focusing his attention on minor nuisances to the lives of New Yorkers. Giuliani did not blame the problems with the city on poverty and the city's unwillingness to combat it. He instead blamed it on the victims of poverty. It's the street tax paid to drunks and panhandlers. It's the squeegee men shaking down the motorist waiting at the light. It's the trash storms.
This is literally just like, I mean, you can tell that he worked for the Reagan administration because he's basically attacking the people. Yeah, this is like another version of like a welfare queen narrative.
Squeegee men shaking down the motorist waiting at the light.
The squeegee man shaking him down with the squeegee.
The trash.
That's a very funny line. I don't know. That's hilarious to me.
Storms, the swirling mass of garbage left by peddlers and panhandlers and open-air drug bazaars on unclean streets. Giuliani inverted the blame. The problem was not poverty, the problem was the poor were just in the way. When Giuliani was elected mayor, he weaponized the NYPD to make life miserable for the poor, to vacate them from public view, to operate under the broken windows style of policing, and to over-police black neighborhoods. Poverty did not go away, it was merely less visible. the goal of conservative politicians and perhaps politicians in general. The NYPD conducted sweeps of parks and other public places to arrest homeless people and move them to shelters. This was not done to help the homeless, but to remove them from sight.
Yep.
Shelters have limitations.
It's like that
and
episode of The Simpsons where there's the homeless guy that they're cleaning up the city, and the homeless guy turns into a mailbox.
Giuliani himself campaigned on reducing city services for the homeless. From time to time, the NYPD would make headlines for their Gestapo tactics. When 4 police officers murdered African immigrant Amadou Diallo, Giuliani remained cold. According to Andrew Kurtzman, author of Rudy Giuliani, Emperor of the City, minority residents had been harassed and humiliated by police so many times on the streets of their own neighborhoods that the department had come to be viewed as an occupying force, and the shooting of the African street peddler was the last straw.
An occupying force. They consider the NYPD an occupying force. That's really interesting.
Watching to see how Giuliani would respond to Diallo's death, the public saw a cold man, unsympathetic to the pain of black residents, and so alienated from their leaders that he'd refused to meet with them for years. When black leaders asked to meet with Giuliani, the mayor refused. It was a constant source of frustration for black leaders, consistently being denied an audience with the mayor or to have their concerns heard. Giuliani's tenure as mayor was riddled with bizarre scandals and outrageous public statements, some political and some personal. In a desperate attempt at inciting a culture war, Giuliani somehow came down hard on the world of art, threatening to cut funding if museums displayed paintings that offended his Catholic sensibilities. Giuliani feuded with the Board of Education, supporting the privatization of schools.
Come on, man! Like, Catholics are not that sensitive, are they?
Threatening to cut funding if museums displayed paintings that offended his Catholic sensibilities. Giuliani feuded with the Board of Education, supporting the privatization of schools that parents voted against. These public feuds with invented enemies paled in comparison to the intersection between his romantic life and his professional life. According to Michael Wolff, author of The Tragedy of Rudy Giuliani, no successful politician in modern media times had been so open with his disregard of the public protocols of marriage as Giuliani. As mayor, he cheated on his then wife, his second wife, Donna Hanover, carrying on a long-time affair with a 28-year-old junior staffer, Christine Lategano, who was suddenly promoted to top staffer. In the throes of his next public affair with Judy Nathan, a pharmaceutical sales representative that he met at his favorite cigar bar, he rejected his wife, still technically Hanover, and informed her of the formal end of their marriage in a news conference.
Wow.
Despite all this, some New Yorkers were happy that Giuliani had seemingly brought the crime rate down. However, prior to becoming mayor, the crime rate in New York had already begun dropping, as it had throughout the United States since the 90s. Supporters of Rudy Giuliani ignored this, giving credit to the mayor's increase in police officers and advocacy for more aggressive police tactics. Ever since the crime rate began to drop in the 90s, study after study has concluded that the cause of this drop is more related to economy, criminogenic conditions, social change, and even reproductive rights. There is no one singular cause. In fact, among these reasons, the increase in police power and the crime bill were negligible as factors. Nevertheless, even though it is probably false, it sounds true. More police officers equals less criminals sounds like it makes sense, and people can more readily understand the concept.
Well, plus it has this sort of hard line, like, oh, I'm fighting crime. I'm not just sort of like giving, like, I'm not being like a wuss and providing resources to these people who don't deserve it. Like, that's sort of the whole sort of conservative line, is to just say we fight these problems with a stick, and not we solve these problems by actually addressing them. That's just classic conservatism.
More readily accept the concept. Giuliani was counting on that. Politicians count on the fact that people will sometimes accept something that appears true without context rather than what is true when context is added. Now, it would be dishonest to claim that there were no victories during Rudy Giuliani's tenure as mayor, but it would also be dishonest to give undue credit and to whitewash his many failings. This false image of crime and this false image of himself provides cover to do as he pleases. Giuliani helped gentrify neighborhoods in New York and made them more expensive. Well, who cares, he says. The economy went up during his tenure. Giuliani helped establish a more aggressive NYPD, the consequences of which are still being felt today. Well, who cares, he says. The crime rate went down during his tenure. Giuliani learned that in politics, perception is reality, and this lesson served him well when he needed to establish himself as a hero to the public on the most significant day of his life. This next section is difficult to talk about, but it is also impossible to ignore. On September 11th, 2001, Rudy Giuliani was made the most popular politician in the United States. This happened for 3 reasons. First, he was recorded walking down the streets of New York following the attack on the World Trade Center. Second, he touted his Office of Emergency Management as the reason that any New Yorkers were saved that day. Third,
Make
he
sure
was
to
a
give
visible
himself credit.
figurehead and a symbol of strength during a day in which the President of the United States, George W. Bush, was comparatively absent. Bush will forever be remembered as the president who continued reading a story to children after being told a plane had struck the World Trade Center, then kept going for another 7 minutes after being told a second plane had struck and that the nation was most definitely
Morning,
under
Jewel.
attack. He and his administration
Or
were
half
also
morning.
slow to make remarks
I
on
guess.
the events of that day, something that might ease the tensions of the nation. Perhaps because they were too busy already plotting an endless series of wars. Who knows? To give the devil his due, Giuliani made a number of speeches both on that day and in the aftermath. He consulted experts on what he should say in order to ease the frayed nerves of the residents of New York City, and indeed the nation. His speeches were well received. It was the least he could do. As for any practical help, that is where giving Giuliani any credit must end. The notions that Giuliani helped spread that day about his fabled Office of Emergency Management and how he foresaw everything were absolutely wrong. And years of studies, investigations, and the 9/11 Commission itself have all proven that, if anything, Giuliani left New York unprepared for a terrorist attack due to a series of dangerous and selfish decisions. Prior to Giuliani's tenure as mayor, the city already had an Office of Emergency Management run by the police department. However, Giuliani wanted the office to be completely under his control. Giuliani established the headquarters of his mayor's Office of Emergency Management at the worst possible location, the World Trade Center. Although terrorists previously targeted this location in 1993, and Giuliani was warned that this was a potentially catastrophic mistake, he refused to take the advice of experts. Giuliani demanded that the Office of Emergency Management be at the World Trade Center for one simple reason. It was within walking distance of the City Hall. Giuliani did not want to have to drive to the Office of Emergency Management headquarters, and in the case of an emergency, he wanted to be present to be seen coordinating instead of leaving it to the professionals. When the World Trade Center was struck, the OEM headquarters at the location had to be evacuated. The OEM was directed by a man named Richie Shearer, who was appointed not because of any experience or talent, but because he was a Giuliani loyalist. Shearer earned the position not because he was the best man for the job, but as an exchange for his endorsement of Giuliani. Shearer was
Classic.
a leader of one of the few unions to endorse Giuliani's 1993 candidacy, the Dispatchers Union. On 9/11, Shearer was completely lost, unprepared for a job that he received entirely because he would follow the mayor's orders. 9/11 Commission member and former Secretary of the Navy, John Lehman, said that Giuliani's OEM was not worthy of the Boy Scouts, let alone this great city. According to Wayne Barrett, author of Grand Illusion, The Untold Story of Rudy Giuliani and 9/11, the myth-making about Rudy Giuliani began on September 11th, and it involved an attempt to extrapolate his dramatic performance on that day into something more important. It seemed unfeeling, almost unpatriotic, to ask whether Giuliani and his underlings had done enough to prepare New York for this terrible...
Yeah, that is true. Like, there's this sort of like and he would, I don't know, like he would sort of like have a very sort of pearl clutchy reaction to a lot of these, like anytime that would come into question too. Like he would try and essentially say, we're New Yorkers and we stick together and we're not going to throw blame and all this other kind of stuff too.
Although in some ways predictable moment. It was much less understandable as the months wore on to allow the afterglow of that moment to impose a national amnesia.
National amnesia.
Another serious blunder, one that undoubtedly cost countless lives, was Giuliani not providing the fire department with modern communications equipment. They desperately needed more than the old 1960s-style handy talkies, but this was not given priority. A lot of the firefighters died that day because they did not know where to go or when to evacuate.
Jesus.
As far as emergency services went, Giuliani was far more concerned with funding the increase in police presence and militarization because these were steps that could be seen by the public, unlike the more invisible emergency upgrades that never came. The visibility of this increased police presence would allow Giuliani's claims of lowering the crime rate to be more believable, whereas modern communications equipment would not serve this image. Anyone can make mistakes during a crisis, but these actions that set
Everything's
the
about
stage for this
image.
disaster took place in the years prior to 9/11. Giuliani, calm and collected in the pre-9/11 world, chose himself over the citizens of New York time and time again. Again from Grand Illusion by Wayne Barrett. The facts, depressing but unavoidable, were that Giuliani had allowed the city to meet the disaster of September 11th unprepared in myriad ways. His sine qua non of preparedness for disasters like this one, the Office of Emergency Management, had neither the power nor the capacity to cope with any grave crisis. The command center had been built in the most vulnerable location possible, leaving the city without an operational headquarters when one was most needed.
Wow.
The public authority that owned the World Trade Center was encouraged to evade agreements binding it to comply with the building and fire codes, and the city's most critical agency that morning, the fire department, was allowed to retain ancient customs, faulty communications, and a culture that left it incapable of protecting itself or others in its worst moment of crisis. Based on the 9/11 Commission, further studies, and testimony from police officers and firefighters, the response was hindered by the actions and policies of Rudy Giuliani. More people died due to his negligence and ego, and no amount of optics can change that.
Trying to get the
Giuliani
link.
became the hero of 9/11 because he happened to be mayor when it occurred.
Yep.
He weaponized
He
the mythology
literally,
about
like, it would have literally, anybody else in that position, almost anybody else in that position would have done a better job, but he benefited because he was the mayor.
because he happened to be mayor when it occurred. He weaponized a mythology about himself, a fabrication about himself, to further his political career. Giuliani helped popularize the idea that questioning his mythology was unpatriotic. In the aftermath of 9/11, something unpatriotic was tantamount to treasonous, and few dared
Dude,
to
I
question his
remember,
fabrication.
like, after 9/11, I live in, the South. I live in Louisiana, and, like, people were put, like, I'd never seen so many goddamn, like, flags on people's, like, front, like, in their yards and stuff. Like, it was crazy. Like the overwhelming sort of, like patriotic, like, backlash of it was really, really insane, and, like, a lot of people, like, joined the military and died in wars of fucking imperial conquest because of it.
Anti-terror bona fides until years later. About 2 weeks after 9/11,
And not to
seeing
mention
a
the,
once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
not to mention the, millions of, what, 500,000 Iraqis and Afghanis and from all the places. I don't know the number. It's a lot.
Rudy Giuliani attempted to cancel the 2001 New York City mayor election. Giuliani was on his way out as 9/11 approached, and following the attack, he tried to remain in office indefinitely. His efforts
Awesome.
were immediately thwarted, and though his tyrannical action would have been seen as a massive authoritarian overreach in any other year, in any other city, conducted by any other individual, his unearned but still powerful goodwill allowed for this to be quickly swept under the rug, never damaging his reputation. Few people even remember it to this day. In 2008, Giuliani ran for president of the United States. However, his close association with a corrupt, tax fraud criminal named Bernard Kerik, as well as having no real identity beyond the now fraudulent hero of 9/11 persona, Giuliani faded into the background and eventually left the race. He went back into private practice and largely disappeared from the public eye until...
Yeah.
Rudy Giuliani.
Now we get like fun, like fun Giuliani, right? Now we get like wild Giuliani, the one that screams about trial by combat.
Giuliani had been out of the spotlight for years. There was speculation in 2010 that he might run for governor.
The one that farts the audibly farts in the middle of a court proceeding. Or
of New York, but he quickly squashed it, claiming that he would spend more time on his law firms, Giuliani Partners and Bracewell and Giuliani. He had transformed his name into one of respect, however unearned that respect might have been, and he was cashing in on that image. That all changed in 2015, when Giuliani began to catch the attention of the Republican Party once more, not to mention the media. At a Republican fundraising event in 2015, Giuliani said of then-President Barack Obama, "He doesn't
love you.
I do not believe that President Obama loves America. He doesn't love you, and he doesn't love me. He wasn't brought up the way you were brought up, and I was brought up through love of his country."
That's incredible. Why would he say something like that? Huh. What is he trying to angle at? Interesting.
When criticized for this comment being a racist dog whistle, Giuliani said that it could not have been racist because Obama has a white mother.
Of course.
Giuliani was not the only Republican testing the waters of thinly veiled nationalism, racism, and xenophobia. In May, Donald Trump announced his candidacy for President of the United States, and in 2016, his inflammatory media-assisted campaign bought him the Republican nomination. Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani went way back. Mayor Giuliani helped the future president with his real estate and appeared together in a well-known comedy sketch at Giuliani's Inner Circle press roast. In 2016, both saw a new relationship between them as mutually beneficial. For Giuliani, it meant that he was back in the picture as part of the Trump campaign, back in the spotlight after years in the private sector. His image had not yet been eroded, but his memory was fading. Siding with Trump allowed him to steal some of the spotlight for himself, and if elected, Giuliani could take a cabinet position, or so he thought. According to Michael Wolff, author of Fire and Fury, Inside the Trump White House, Giuliani wanted to be the Secretary of State, and Trump had in so many words offered him the job. The resistance to Giuliani from the Trump circle derived from the same reason Trump was inclined to give him the job. Giuliani had Trump's ear, and wouldn't let go. The staff whispered about his health and stability. He was offered Attorney General, Department of Homeland Security, and Director of National Intelligence, but he turned them all down, continuing to hold out for state, or in what staffers took to be the ultimate presumption, or grand triangulation,
Supreme
the
Court.
Supreme Court.
Could you? Oh my God! Could you imagine Supreme Court Justice Rudy Giuliani? That would be just incredible. That would be like that would actually be perfect. Like the idea that the idea that the Supreme Court, okay, one of two things would happen. Thing one would be like the Supreme Court becomes like exposed for the complete and utter sham that it actually is. Like it's, I don't know, like Giuliani is such a like clear figure that like this is a bunch of bullshit, right? Or the probably more likely but more ridiculous scenario, in my opinion, that like the rebranding of Giuliani as a noble justice that is, you know, very deliberative and very, very, you know, considered and all this other kind of crap that you get from all the, you know, when you talk about all these people. I mean, that's kind of what happened with Kavanaugh. God, that would have, we missed an opportunity. We missed an opportunity, folks. That would have been a hell of a like plot twist in the newest season of America. Loudest,
Trump,
SCOTUS ever,
the
right?
benefits were even more obvious. Giuliani was still seen as a moderate Republican, despite evidence to the contrary. If Giuliani could become his defender, his attack dog against accusations and scandal, Trump's protestations of innocence would appear more legitimate. At the Republican National Convention, America's mayor said that Trump would
America's
do
mayor.
for the United States what he did for New York. To the Republicans in attendance, who remembered only the optics of 9/11, this was a remarkable endorsement. But for everyone who knew the truth, this was a threat. Once Trump was elected, Giuliani's gambit did not pay off, as his insistence on Secretary of State and nothing else resulted in him getting the latter. Nothing. Giuliani was
Owned.
instead given the role of advisor, which meant he had no real power. But eventually he got a more personal role as part of Trump's team, his lawyer. Trump had long seen his lawyer as his fixer, someone to disentangle himself from scandal through criminal methods that go beyond the traditional role of lawyer. That was Michael Cohen's position for years. Once Cohen had his public fall, owing in large part to his association with Trump, there was an opening, and Giuliani jumped in to protect Trump against the Mueller investigation. Giuliani's law firm did not want to represent Trump, which forced Giuliani to go it alone. Again, from the tragedy of Rudy Giuliani. Beyond his atrophied legal skills, the 74-year-old, given his weight and his knee injury, could barely rise from a chair or get out of a car. There was the belief among many that, at best, his intellectual prowess had surely dimmed. He was, as he told Bannon and as most believed, too old to go back to practicing law. What's more, not to put a fine point on it, he was often drunk. Almost simultaneously with his new appointment as the president's lawyer, Giuliani's third marriage formally broke up. This was accompanied by a new affair, this time with a hospital administrator, Maria Rosa Ryan, 53. The Department of Justice long ago signaled it would never indict a sitting president, regardless of the crime, which meant Giuliani didn't have to do all that much except protect Trump's public image while he was under fire and delegitimize the investigation to the voters. Eventually, Giuliani was given a different task altogether. With re-election looming, Trump allegedly instructed Giuliani to uncover information on likely Democratic nominee Joe Biden and his son Hunter.
Yes.
From 2014
Here
to
we go. It's Hunter time, baby. It's Hunter time. Let's go.
2019, Hunter Biden served on the board of Burisma Holdings, one of the largest natural gas producers in Ukraine. In 2019,
What a wonderful
Giuliani
company.
privately urged Ukrainian President Zelensky to dig up information on Hunter, as this would benefit Trump's re-election in 2020. Giuliani conducted this operation with two Ukrainians named Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. In October 2019, both Parnas and Fruman were arrested for planning to direct funds from a foreign government to United States politicians. Also that year, an investigation into Giuliani's role began. Trump himself was caught pressuring the Ukrainian president to launch an investigation against the Biden family, allegedly threatening to withhold foreign aid if he did not comply. In December, Trump was impeached for this, but partisan politics make conviction in the Senate a near impossibility for any president and for any misdeed. Nevertheless, even with Trump still in office, it became clear to even those who bought into Rudy Giuliani as America's mayor and the hero of 9/11 that he had chosen his associations poorly and that he was on the wrong side of history. For those who had followed his career closely, this was merely confirmation of the rot inside Giuliani that had existed from the beginning. In 2020, following the election victory of Joe Biden, Giuliani became one of the loudest proponents of the election conspiracy theory, and in doing so, permanently aligned himself with Trump. In addition to his false image as a moderate and a man of conviction, his image on a more personal level was tainted through a stream of humiliating public disasters. In 2020, Giuliani was caught almost
Oh my
literally
gosh,
with his
this
pants
Borat
down.
thing.
In the
This
comedy
is
picture
crazy.
Borat
This is nuts, man. Like, watch this.
subsequent movie film, Giuliani was introduced to a young woman portraying an even
I will
younger
after.
woman.
Well, hold on. Give me 1
Giuliani-
second. Good Lord. He just like jumped up on the bed and just like started like whipping his dick out. Like, that's so disgusting. Here's the link, Cloud.
started Trigger Borat subsequent movie film, Giuliani was introduced to a young woman portraying an even younger woman. Giuliani started touching himself in her presence. After the election, Giuliani held a press conference at Four Seasons Total Landscaping, presumably because someone in Trump's
Total
orbit
Landscaping.
mistakenly thought they had booked the event at a Four Seasons hotel. The details of what exactly went wrong are in dispute, as some have tried desperately to save face. On January 6, 2021, at a rally in Washington, D.C.,
Trial by
Giuliani
combat.
shouted that there must be a trial by combat, and he got exactly that. Much like in the wake of 9/11, Giuliani once again tried his hand at authoritarian election interference. Trump was impeached again for inciting the insurrection, or riot, or whatever euphemism makes people more comfortable about the loss of life that day. Giuliani slunk away after Joe Biden was inaugurated, possibly never to be seen again after a steady stream of public humiliations. And then the other shoe dropped. The Ukraine investigation escalated in April 2021. Giuliani's offices and home were raided by the FBI and officials from the Southern District of New York. 18 electronic devices were confiscated. The investigation surrounds
Dude,
whether or
Giuliani
not
is so
Giuliani acted as an unregistered foreign agent for then President Trump, but the extent of the potential charges has not yet been revealed. In addition to these potential charges, Giuliani is now suffering the added public humiliation of being raided by the SDNY, where he himself was once an attorney. Even if Giuliani is never arrested or
Fucking owned.
convicted, this cloud of suspicion hanging over him from the district that previously propelled him into stardom is a final humiliation that will last him the rest of his life. His image has been washed away. His optics have been exposed
This
as
boot
transparent
black or whatever he had in
propaganda,
his hair, just
and
like running
all
down
that
his
is
face.
left is another disgraced politician, permanently melting down in front of people he tried to fool his entire life.
All right. Yeah, he also had a really creepy story. Like he was telling this on I think it was on either his radio show or Steve Bannon's radio show about essentially gawking at Michelle Wee's butt while golfing. Like the dude is an absolute creep. Absolute creep. Well, anyway, that's gonna be it for today. If anybody could get in contact with Renegade Cut, tell them I like their videos, and also please unblock me. I don't know why I'm blocked by them. I've never interacted, but I'm gonna keep watching their videos. They do a pretty good job. But yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. I'm about to go wish Andrea a happy birthday over on her stream, CyberDemon531. Maybe you should do the same. All right, everybody. Love you. Bye.